This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
Angela Morris was 40 years old, and loneliness had become a familiar companion. She had tried in her younger years to follow the path expected of her, dating men, marrying one, raising a family in the way everyone around her said she should. On the surface, it seemed fine. She smiled through dinners, anniversaries, holidays. But deep inside, something never connected. She could laugh, she could care. But when it came to love, she felt like she was pretending. The spark others spoke of, the rush, the hunger, the sense of being truly seen, was always missing. It took years and the collapse of her marriage for Angela to admit the truth she had carried since girlhood. She did not feel drawn to men. She never had. The only real emotional pull she had ever known was toward women. The way her heart quickened at a soft voice, a touch of understanding, a kind of presence she could not find in her husband no matter how hard she tried. For decades, she buried that truth under routine, under duty, under fear of judgment. But after her divorce, when nights grew long and silence filled her home, she began to confront it. Angela was a lesbian, and saying that, even silently to herself, felt both terrifying and freeing. She was not ashamed of who she was, but in her small town, there were few women like her, and even fewer safe places to find them. So she did what many do. She turned to the internet. It started with curiosity, just browsing forums and social spaces where women like her spoke openly. Then came messages, first casual, then deeper. And that was where she met her, or at least the woman she believed was real. Samantha. Samantha's words carried warmth. She spoke about the same loneliness Angela knew, about searching for connection in a world that often misunderstood. She told stories about long nights filled with music, about books that touched her soul, about how hard it was to find women willing to love honestly after 40. Angela felt those words like a mirror. For the first time, she didn't feel strange or wrong. She felt understood. They wrote to each other for weeks, then months. The glow of her phone at night became a lifeline. Angela would curl under her blanket, rereading the messages that made her feel alive again. She told her closest friend that she thought this could be real, that maybe she had finally found someone who could see her as she truly was. But beneath the surface of those tender words lay a lie. Samantha wasn't Samantha. The photographs, the carefully crafted details, the soft-spoken way she typed, all of it was fiction. Behind the screen was a man, watching, waiting, molding himself into the image of the woman Angela longed for. When Samantha suggested meeting in person, Angela's heart raced. She hesitated, fearful but hopeful. What if this was it? What if love, so long delayed, had finally arrived? She packed a small bag, smoothed her hair, and told her daughter she'd be gone for a weekend. She explained little, partly out of privacy, partly out of nerves, but her heart raced with anticipation. Rain streaked the glass as the city blurred past. Angela imagined her first moment with Samantha. The hug, the smile, the conversation spilling into the night. She imagined laughter, warmth, maybe even the possibility of love that had always seemed just out of reach. But what awaited her was not love. It was deception. Not Samantha, but a stranger. A man who had lured her in with lies, who had seen her longing not as something sacred, but as something to exploit. The meeting that should have brought her joy became the moment no one who knew her could forget. A moment where trust was betrayed, identity was violated, and her search for love turned into a nightmare. Angela's story is not just about what happened that day. It is about the hunger for connection, the courage of truth, and the terrible cost of crossing paths with someone who twists that truth for harm. She went in search of love. Instead, she found destruction. And the question remains, how does an ordinary woman's search for companionship become the door through which her deepest vulnerability is used against her? For Angela Morris, life before that meeting still carried the patterns of ordinary survival. Her world was not glamorous, but it was stable in its own way. She lived in a modest two-bedroom home on the edge of town, its walls painted in soft earth tones she had chosen after the divorce, a quiet declaration that this house would now be hers alone. The small living room was decorated with family photographs, most of them of her daughter. There was laughter frozen in those frames, reminders of birthdays, graduations, and simple weekends at the park. Angela's daily rhythm was predictable. She woke early to prepare breakfast before her workday, leaving encouraging notes for her daughter on the kitchen table. She worked long hours in customer service, a job that drained her at times but gave her the means to keep her household afloat. In the evenings, she came home tired, yet determined to give her daughter stability. A cooked meal, shared conversations, and the comfort of a home where they could both feel safe. But beyond that routine, Angela carried a quiet longing. She had given her best years to a marriage that never filled her heart. She had tried to make it work, believing for a long time that if she worked harder, if she smiled brighter, if she gave more, something inside her would shift. But it never had. Her ex-husband was not unkind, yet the connection had always been hollow. Angela knew it now more than ever. Her soul had never belonged in that union. She had stayed for her daughter, for appearances, for the hope that maybe she could learn to feel what others seemed to feel so easily. Now, free of that weight, she was ready to be herself. But being herself was not without cost. In her community, being openly lesbian still carried risk of judgment, of whispers, of doors quietly closing. So Angela kept her truth close, sharing it only with a few trusted friends. To most, she was simply a single mother trying to piece her life back together. And to her daughter, she was everything. Their bond was strong, woven through years of shared hardship and triumph. Angela took pride in the way she had raised her. Independent, sharp, resilient. Yet that same independence sometimes left Angela alone in the quiet of the evenings, when the house felt too large and the silence pressed in. It was in that silence that she turned more often to her phone, to the messages that made her feel less alone. Samantha had become part of her evenings, part of her comfort. Angela laughed at her jokes, confided her fears, shared stories she rarely spoke aloud. With each passing week, the digital connection deepened until it felt like she had someone waiting for her at the other end of every day. Angela began to hope again. She pictured dinners shared with someone who understood her, nights filled with laughter rather than silence, mornings where she wouldn't have to drink her coffee alone. It wasn't just about romance, it was about belonging. And after years of hiding, of pretending, of bending herself into shapes that never fit, she finally believed she might have found it. To her daughter and her friends, Angela seemed lighter, as though some quiet burden had been lifted. She smiled more often, hummed while cooking, and allowed herself to imagine a future with more than just responsibility in it. But in the glow of that hope, there were shadows she didn't notice. Samantha sometimes avoided video calls. Sometimes her answers to questions were vague, rehearsed, slightly off. Angela noticed, but she brushed it aside. Loneliness can dull suspicion, and hope can silence the inner voice that warns of danger. Her world before the crime was not one of despair. It was one of fragile hope, a safe illusion. She believed she was walking toward love, unaware that each step was carrying her closer to a darkness she could not yet see. For weeks, Angela's life seemed to glow with new possibility. She carried her phone with her constantly, waiting for the next message. Samantha's words had become a part of her day, a rhythm, a comfort, a promise. But small cracks had already begun to show, hairline fractures in the perfect story Angela wanted to believe. The first came when Angela suggested a video call. It was a simple request, born out of curiosity and eagerness. She wanted to put a real voice, a real face to the words that had sustained her. But Samantha hesitated. She gave reasons. Her camera was broken, the lighting was bad, she wasn't feeling well. At first, Angela accepted the excuses. She told herself not everyone was comfortable on video. She wanted to be patient, but the excuses kept coming. Each time Angela pressed gently, Samantha deflected. And though Angela ignored it outwardly, something inside her stirred. A small voice whispered that something was wrong. She tried to quiet it, reminding herself how real their conversations felt, how much Samantha seemed to understand her. Then there were the stories. Sometimes details shifted. The name of a supposed coworker changed, or the description of her apartment didn't match what she had said weeks earlier. Angela noticed the inconsistencies but pushed them away. Loneliness has a way of reshaping reality, of choosing belief over doubt. At work, her coworkers noticed her distraction. She smiled at her phone more often, drifted through tasks with a lighter step. To them, it seemed like she was finally finding happiness. But one friend, the one Angela confided in most, raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure this woman is who she says she is?" she asked carefully. Angela bristled, defending the relationship, insisting it was real. Still, the words lodged in her mind. Her daughter, too, began to notice. Angela guarded the details, but teenagers sense more than parents realize. One evening, she asked bluntly, "Mom, who are you texting all the time?" Angela laughed it off, but in that moment, a flicker of guilt moved across her face. Not because she was doing anything wrong, but because she couldn't shake the feeling that she was building something fragile, something that might collapse if exposed to too much light. Meanwhile, the pull toward Samantha only grew stronger. Angela was torn between caution and longing. She reread their messages at night, clinging to the intimacy they created. When Samantha said she wished they could finally meet, Angela felt the weight of both fear and hope pressing down on her. Other small signs appeared. Samantha grew insistent about Angela traveling to meet her rather than the other way around. She brushed off Angela's questions with playful banter, redirecting the conversation to romantic promises. Angela told herself it was just logistics, nothing more. Yet deep down, she knew this was another crack in the perfect image. In her community, whispers of her loneliness were already there. Neighbors noted how she seemed distracted, how she no longer lingered for small talk. Some thought she was hiding something. Others believed she had simply fallen in love. They didn't know which, and neither did Angela. By now, the safe illusion of her world was beginning to fray, but the danger wasn't obvious, not yet. To Angela, the unease seemed like ordinary nerves, the kind anyone might feel before opening their heart fully. What she couldn't know was that each excuse, each inconsistency, each demand was a thread leading her toward a truth darker than she imagined. Two possibilities hovered in her mind. One, that she was on the brink of the love she had longed for her entire life. The other, that her doubts were real, and that she was about to discover she had been deceived. In her loneliness, she chose to believe in love, and that choice carried her closer to the moment when belief would turn into betrayal. The day Angela set out to meet Samantha felt heavy with rain. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that seemed to press down on the earth. Angela woke early, her hands trembling as she packed a small weekend bag. A sweater, a change of clothes, her favorite book, and a necklace she had not worn in years. She told herself this was the beginning of something new, a step into a future she had long delayed. Her daughter asked where she was going. Angela offered only a vague answer, not out of malice, but because she wasn't ready to explain something so fragile, something that still felt like it could vanish if spoken aloud. "Just a trip," she said softly. "I'll be back in a couple of days." Her daughter hugged her and let her go. On the bus ride, Angela stared out the window as raindrops streaked down the glass. She imagined Samantha waiting for her, the embrace, the smile, the relief of finally seeing the woman whose words had become a lifeline. Every bump in the road carried her further from safety and closer to the truth she could not yet see. When she arrived at the meeting place, her heart pounded. She scanned the area for the face she had memorized from photos. She looked for a woman, the woman she had trusted, the woman she believed she had grown to love. But the person who approached was not Samantha. It was a man. Angela froze. At first, her mind tried to make sense of it. Perhaps he was a friend. Perhaps he was there on Samantha's behalf. But the way he looked at her erased those thoughts instantly. His eyes carried no warmth, only calculation. He introduced himself casually, as though nothing was wrong, as though she should have expected this. Her stomach turned cold. Her voice trembled as she asked where Samantha was. The man smiled faintly, a smile that told her she was already trapped. "I'm Samantha," he said. The words hit her like a blow. Every message, every late-night conversation, every spark of hope, it all collapsed in that moment. Angela felt the ground tilt beneath her. She wanted to leave, to run, but shock pinned her in place. The betrayal was too sudden, too sharp. He coaxed her toward his car, his voice low but firm. She hesitated, but fear tangled with confusion, and she followed, hoping for an explanation, hoping this was some mistake. But as the doors locked and the engine started, she understood that she was no longer in control. The ride was silent except for the hum of the tires on wet pavement. Angela sat stiff, her hands clutching her bag, her mind racing through every warning she had ignored. She replayed the excuses, the vague answers, the pressure to meet. Each memory now cut like glass. When they arrived at a secluded place, her worst fear took shape. He pulled her inside, his demeanor shifting from calm to predatory. Angela pleaded, her voice cracking with disbelief. She tried to appeal to reason, to humanity, to anything that might stop what was coming. But he was unmoved. To him, her vulnerability was not sacred. It was an opportunity. The assault that followed was not just physical. It was the crushing of trust, the violation of her identity, the shattering of her hope. Angela's body trembled under the weight of fear, her mind desperate to retreat from the nightmare unfolding. She had come seeking love from another woman. Instead, she was forced into the hands of a man who had stolen her trust, her dignity, and her choice. When it was over, he left her broken in the silence of that place. The room felt colder, the walls closer, the air heavier. Angela sat in shock, her breath shallow, her mind struggling to piece together what had just happened. The betrayal was total. The woman she had believed in had never existed. The man who stood over her had stolen not only her body, but the fragile hope she had dared to believe in. He left her there, driving away without remorse, as though she were nothing more than a discarded secret. Angela was left to gather herself, to stand, to breathe, to try to understand how a search for love had become a descent into horror. This was the breaking point, the moment when her world collapsed, and it would not end there, because soon her absence would be noticed, soon questions would be asked, and soon the shockwaves of this crime would tear through her family, her community, and the fragile illusion of safety they all thought they had. When Angela did not return home that evening, the silence in her house grew louder with each passing hour. Her daughter waited, glancing at the clock, telling herself her mother had simply been delayed. But by the second night, unease turned into fear. Angela had never been careless about her responsibilities. She had never disappeared without word. Something was wrong. Her closest friend was the first to act. Concerned after unanswered calls and messages, she went to Angela's home. The bag Angela had packed was missing, but the house itself was untouched. A dinner plate still on the counter, her favorite blanket folded neatly on the couch. It was as though time had paused in her absence. The police were contacted, and the investigation began. At first, officers treated it as a missing persons case, cautious but hopeful. They asked questions about where Angela might have gone, who she had been speaking to. Her daughter mentioned the phone conversations, the messages with someone named Samantha, but she didn't know much more. Angela had guarded the details, protective of her private truth. When detectives searched her phone, they uncovered the trail, the late-night messages, the promises, the arranged meeting, the picture of Samantha, a woman who did not exist. To investigators, it was the first real sign that Angela had been lured into something dangerous. As news spread through the community, disbelief rippled. Neighbors who had seen Angela as dependable, kind, ordinary, now faced the unthinkable. She was missing, and the last person she trusted was a stranger no one could identify. Her coworkers lit candles at a vigil, holding photographs of her smiling face. Friends posted online, begging for information, hoping someone had seen something. Speculation grew quickly. Some whispered that Angela had been deceived, others that she had simply left willingly and would return. But the longer she remained absent, the less anyone believed in easy explanations. The community's grief turned into anger. How could someone so careful, so selfless, become the victim of such cruelty? Police canvassed the area where Angela was last known to have traveled. Witnesses remembered seeing her at the bus station, quiet, nervous, with a small bag in her hands. A few recalled her stepping into a car with a man, a detail that jarred with the digital evidence of her meeting a woman. That contradiction fueled suspicion. If Samantha was not Samantha, then who was she really speaking to? The early days of the investigation were heavy with tension. Officers gathered fragments of evidence, but nothing pointed clearly to one person. The community's fear grew because if someone could create a false identity and lure Angela away, it meant the same could happen to anyone. Meanwhile, Angela's daughter faced the unbearable weight of waiting. She replayed her last moments with her mother, the vague explanation, the hug at the door, the smile that now felt more like a goodbye. She wondered what her mother had kept from her, what truths had gone unspoken. And most of all, she wondered if she would ever see her again. The fallout spread wider as media picked up the story. Headlines described Angela as a loving mother, a devoted friend, and a woman deceived by an online predator. The narrative was clear. Someone had built a mask of lies, and Angela had walked into it with trust. Each new day without answers deepened the community's grief and sharpened their resolve. They wanted justice. They wanted to know who had done this and why. But for now, all they had were fragments, a trail of messages, a false identity, and the haunting image of Angela stepping into a car that would take her away from everything she loved. For weeks, the case pressed forward with painful uncertainty. Detectives combed through Angela's phone records, tracing every exchange with Samantha. What they found painted a chilling picture. The language had been calculated, deliberate, designed to lower her guard. Every detail about Samantha's supposed life dissolved under scrutiny. The photographs were stolen, the names of co-workers, the addresses, the anecdotes, all fabricated. The turning point came when investigators followed the digital trail. The account that had belonged to Samantha was linked through layers of false emails and proxy addresses back to a man with a history of fraud and deception. His name surfaced quietly in police files, but it explained everything. The insistence on Angela traveling, the refusal of video calls, the vague inconsistencies. Samantha had never existed. Angela had been targeted by a man who understood how to prey on hope. Armed with this lead, police obtained surveillance footage from the bus station. There she was, Angela stepping off the bus, clutching her bag, scanning the crowd for the woman she believed she was about to meet. And then, the crucial moment, footage of her walking toward a man, the same man identified through the digital investigation. The image was grainy, but clear enough. The mask was gone. Interviews with his acquaintances revealed a troubling pattern. He had posed online as women before, manipulating conversations, drawing people in, but never had his deception escalated so far. In Angela, he had found someone both strong and vulnerable, a woman willing to risk trust after years of guarding her truth. When he was finally confronted, his demeanor was flat, detached. He admitted to the ruse, but downplayed its impact, insisting Angela had come willingly. His words showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of the trauma he had inflicted. In the courtroom, the story was laid bare. Prosecutors described how he had crafted a false identity to lure Angela, how he had used her search for love as a weapon against her. Forensic evidence, digital records, and Angela's testimony drew a line from deception to assault. The defense tried to muddy the waters, to cast doubt, to suggest Angela should have known better. But the jury saw through it. They saw a man who had exploited vulnerability with precision, who had stolen not only Angela's trust, but her sense of safety in the world. The verdict was guilty. Sentencing followed swiftly. And as the gavel struck, the truth that had been hidden behind months of lies stood unshaken. Angela's hope had been twisted into a trap, and justice, though late, had finally caught up with the man who said it. Angela Morris's story is not only about a crime, it is about the fragile, universal search for love. For years, she lived behind expectations that never fit her, trying to mold herself into a life that did not belong to her heart. When she finally found the courage to embrace her truth, she sought connection in the only way she knew was safe, through words on a screen, through promises that seemed real. But love, even in its most vulnerable form, can be twisted by those who see opportunity and trust. What Angela endured was not simply an attack on her body. It was an assault on her identity, her faith in others, and her right to be seen for who she truly was. Her courage should not be remembered only in the context of what was taken from her, but in the honesty she finally allowed herself to live. She dared to reach out for love when silence would have been easier. That choice deserves to be honored, not overshadowed. This case is a reminder that behind every screen is not always the person we hope for. It warns us to be cautious, to listen to the small voices of doubt we too easily silence. But it is also a call to build a world where no one has to hide, where love can be sought openly without fear of being preyed upon. Angela's legacy is not just a story of pain, but of resilience. Proof that even in the darkest betrayal, truth can still stand. If this story moved you, share it. If it opened your eyes, speak about it. And if it reminded you of the dangers of silence, take this moment to protect yourself and those you love. Subscribe, like, and stay with us as we continue to tell the stories that matter. Stories that must never be forgotten.